Of the EUSAIR community, good morning and welcome to today's meeting entitled The Use of European Standards and Regulation Towards Strategic Environmental Management. This is the second of a series of 3 workshops organized by the Forum of the Adriatic and Ionian Chambers of Commerce in collaboration with the University of Padova, in the context of the project EUSAIR Bringing the Green Deal to the Region. So the project is financed by DG Regio and aims to raise environmental awareness and support the adoption of more sustainable practices in the organization of the next EUSAIR meetings once the pandemic is over. For those of you who didn't attend the first workshop, let me introduce myself and set a little bit the context. I am Eleonora Tramannoni, the Executive Officer of the Forum of the Adriatic and Ionian Chambers of Commerce, a transnational association connecting more than 40 chambers of commerce all over the Adriatic and Ionian Basin. The forum, which has been operating since 2001, enhancing the socio-economic development of the area, represents one of the main stakeholders of the European strategy for the Adriatic and Ionian region, the so-called EUSAIR. So the forum is the coordinator of the project that I mentioned before and works for its implementation in cooperation with the company T33, which has experience in the European policies, indicators, evaluations, studies, and capacity building, and with the University of Padova, which is among the leading experts in strategic environmental management and green public procurement. I'd like to make just a brief summary of what emerged from the last workshop in order to better understand the focus of today's meeting. So last time we tried to build a common understanding on environmental issues, and we saw the link between the EU policies, programs and regulation, production and consumption partners. We were able to analyze environmental policies from different perspectives, from European level to the EUSAIR region, as well as to learn the application of green public procurement in the Italian context. We have become more aware that GPP is not just a voluntary tool, but is a concrete instrument, and it is already successfully implemented in different countries. The Italian Ministry of Ecological Transition informed us that the quantity and the quality in terms of number and expenses in euro of the procedures referring to the green public procurement have been increasing over the recent years. Despite these improvements, there is still much to be done. GPP is mandatory only in a few European countries, as in Italy, while in many others it is seen as something to be accomplished in the future. We conclude that the role of public institutions and their commitment in adopting green public procurement procedures is fundamental. The GPP is already a practical guide. It is something already applicable and can be applied in Europe, in EUSAIR region and beyond. Using GPP criteria ensures the achievement of the sustainable goals and increases innovation. Basically, the request of public institutions for new services to reduce the environmental impact leads companies to adapt and improve their performance, to provide new, more sustainable products and services. Only in this way, the environment becomes a competitive advantage. Well, for those wishing to watch the replay and presentation of the first workshop, you can find the material on the forum website, forumasc.org. But back to us. This second workshop aims to go into more details and to focus in the structure of environmental standards and their potential application into green public procurement. It will help us better understand procedures, environmental management standards, and European schemes such as EMAS regulation. Finally, the aim is also to encourage the EUSAIR community to take part in the big buyers for climate and environment initiative, which facilitates exchanges among buyers committed to GPP implementations. Before starting and introducing the first speaker, I would like to encourage all of you to share comments with the other participants and write any questions you might have in the chat box. You can decide either to share with all the participants or directly to speakers and organizers. We will answer them at the end of the talk in the session questions and answer. Now, let's start by giving the floor to Professor Alessandro Manzardo, who is the co-organizer of these workshops together with us and a partner of our project. He's a scientific director of the Research Center on Quality Environment of the Department of Industrial Engineering on Strategic Environmental Management, Life Cycle Assessment and Eco-Design of the University of Padua. He will be sharing with us a framework of the role of standards with the GPP procedures. Alessandro, the floor is yours.
Eleonora, what can I say? Thank you very much for the introduction and also for highlighting some keywords coming from our first workshop, which I think is really, really important. In fact, today, we're going to make a step forward once the context is understood and shared among us. And now it's important to say, but how can we actually implement GPP? Who are the different organizations and people, persons involved in this? How can a company support the development of products in compliance with GPP, and how a public administration, on the other hand, can be guaranteed by these new products and services delivered on the market. So this will be the focus of my presentation. In fact, I'm going to share my screen in a second. My presentation, oh, this is a standard. No, you'll understand in a few minutes what it means if not aware of. But this is the title of my presentation, which is the role of standards within green public procurement procedures, informed choices for sustainable procurement. Let me begin my presentation. I always like to have a little bit of context for you to understand where we are basically discussing the topic of the day. In this case, we are talking about probably one of the most important initiatives that we have to let's say not comply to, but we should probably, all of us, adhere to. We are talking about Sustainable Development Goals. We are talking about the specific target, number 12.7, that refer to the public procurements. In fact, GPP is not just a European way of developing a sustainable production and consumption practices, but is something that is agreed, I would say, at least in terms of concepts and ideals all over the world. Europe is at the foreground of this, and as we have learned last time, has set, I would say, a strategic framework with reference to the different products and services that public administration can acquire. But when we talk about environments, of course, and GPP, we're also talking about companies. So let me try to introduce the importance of environmental issues for companies today and how companies are dealing with it. So let's focus on the right side of my screen. Wait a second. There we go. What you see here, in my opinion, is a very interesting representation of the main risks perceived by companies. This is updated year by year by the World Economic Forum. What you see here is the last update that happened this year in February. So a new one will soon come in February 2022. And we as a group are monitoring this kind of feedback from companies since 2016. Let me try to explain how to read this representation. Likelihood is the likelihood of a fact, of an issue, of a problem to affect the competitiveness of a company. And impact refers to the magnitude of the effect in the case an event take actually place. It's really interesting to see that you can imagine what we see in this quadrant are those referred as the most significant issues in terms of likelihood, so probability of happenings and impact. Most of them are related to environments. We have climate action failure, natural resources, biodiversity loss. But even if companies agree that these are risks that they have to share and they have to somehow deal with, I would like you to focus on another aspect that all of us very easily can understand because it refers to something that happened in these 2 years. It refers to the COVID-19. It's up here. As you can see, the probability of happenings is smaller than those related to, for example, climate change, climate action failure, rather than extreme weather events. but is considered to be almost a little bit more impactful if compared, for example, to the issue of climate change. Why am I sharing this? Because when we think about green public procurement, we don't have also to focus on the word public. We also have to think that green public procurement is a system where different actors have a role and where different actors need to play their contribution, to give their contribution to this change, to this shift towards sustainable production and consumption. What we see from this graph is that companies are acquiring every day a more, I would say, evident consciousness about the issue of environment. But let's go further and let's try to at least list the main actors with reference to green public procurement. Well, of course, we have the public bodies. Public bodies are those that are asked, I would say, Europe-wise, warmly welcomed to adopt environmental minimum criteria that refer to those criteria related to green public procurements, criteria that need to be accomplished by who? By the designer, who is the guy or the company that wrote up the different proposal to answer the need of public bodies, and or maybe directly or indirectly companies, those that actually produce the products and release the services that are acquired or can be acquired by public bodies. So three main actors. All of these has a different role. All of these has different responsibilities in the, I would say, let me try to use another term which is pretty common in companies, but let's say the supply chain of green public procurement. Let's see what's the answer of companies, because last time we definitely had an idea and a view that public bodies, if not asked, they are warmly welcome to adopt such criteria. But what do companies do, and how can designer basically knows if a product is complies with environmental criteria? And so does public body. How can they know if a product or services delivered by a company comply to green public procurement criteria? Well, the answer is this: labeling, certification. The problem is that nowadays, if you look at the market, there is a huge proliferation of different labels, different certification schemes. Each of those can be applicable or not to green public procurement procedures. But each of those also give you a different level of guarantees. What label to trust? What can be effectively trusted? Well, to answer this question, let me remind briefly, because I hope that all of you that are participating today were also part of our previous workshop. Let me start from a very important concept. You have to ask yourself, no matter if it's a GPP procedure or as a consumer, like in our everyday life, what is behind the label? In our opinion, behind label, there should be at least the following principles. The labels should look at the products and services in a life cycle approach, from cradle to grave, because we don't want to shift the environmental burden from a life cycle stage to another. Look at this. Zero emissions, like for public transportation, or emission somewhere else. This is to give you an idea of the kind of question we should ask ourselves when we look for purchase and sustainable consumption. Comprehensiveness, so look at different environmental aspects, not just one, as many of the companies are doing today, and many of the labels are referring at today. We need to adopt a system approach. Consider the product within a system. Consider that this product in a system can have impacts, potential impacts, and in another system can have different impacts. And last but not least, try to prevent. So what we're looking for, what we should be looking for, is for products and services that are designed in a more environmental friendly way, starting from the very, very first beginning of the design process. So starting from the concept of the product and service itself. Anyway, so these are the principles we expect a sustainable product and service to respect. But how can we identify, though? How can we decide which of these different labels actually comply to these requirements, actually complies with these principles? Well, the answer is standard. International standards, also national standards, but we are looking, of course, in a more broader perspective. International standards are those documents that define the optimum degree of order in a given context. So environmental standards, which are those that we're going to go through today, are documents that support or define the optimum degree of order within a specific context, which is environment. And these are based on consensus. Myself, I represent my country, Italy, in all of the environmental management procedures with reference to standards of products and processes starting from 2009. Of course, I'm not only one. We are a group of 3 people representing my country. But anyway, just to let you know that I've been involved a lot in these kind of processes. And what I can share with you is that there are many, many countries taking part of these procedures, and we are trying to work in a very collaborative way in order that we can live with the content of the standard. We can basically define and agree that the content of the standards look at optimum degree of order where consensus can be reached. Consensus is not like everyone agrees, but everyone can definitely agree and live with what the content of the standard. So standard has a significant role in this process because those should be the one to determine the optimum degree of order. Once the optimum degree of order is determined in a given context, then I know that I can somehow trust a product or process and services that is produced and released in conformity with such documentation and their requirements and guidelines. We also have to admit that, look at this. This is a representation that I usually share with my students about the several number of standards that refer to environmental management. And these are those refer to the overall environmental management of products and services. Yes, there are also standards, there are sectorial standards. The one we were looking at when I shared my screen, for example, was a sectorial standards on the use of IT equipment. We were asked to do an application of those standards, which is 50,006, sorry. So what you see is that there is a huge variety of standards, but each of these standards gives you an optimum degree of order in a given context. Okay, here you see some abbreviation. So the purpose is not to go into details of each standard, but to give an idea of the story of standards. Well, the first environmental standards to be published, we are talking about ISO TC 207 in this case, which refer to environmental management of products and processes, were those related to the process. So we should think about standards that help companies, help organizations, no matter if public or private, to manage environments. Then it was the turn of product-oriented standards. Well, product-oriented standards are those that are more related to products. And of course, you can easily see that these kind of standards result in labels. Labels, environmental labels that you find on products when you go to the supermarket, for example. Well, the recent development of standards and also the future of standards is to say no more focus or product-oriented, but in the middle. Why? Because nowadays it is already recognized that you cannot distinguish the product from the organization that releases it. You can distinguish the service from the organization that releases it. So an organization that releases the product should take care of its processes and also the performances of the products and service it delivers. Recently, there's also been, but we're not going to detail of this, just to mention, because it's here present, there is a huge, not huge, but let's say an increasing importance is given to the support of the implementation of these standards and projects with reference to green finance. So how to support financially those projects, those companies that work to improve environmental performances with their activities. So these standards gives the framework from where Green Public Procurement has basically picked the different criteria or part of the criteria that are included in the GPP procedures. At least we have to recognize that the adoption of standards by company is recognized to be a guarantee of conformity to Green Public Procurement criteria. Looking at process-oriented criteria, so those that within standard refer to the correct management of environmental performances and processes, and so are taken within GPP procedures, we refer to two very important documents, ISO 40001 and EMAS regulation. ISO 40001 is the reference document for the implementation of environmental management system. You see here a definition of environmental management system, and you see here the conceptual implementation of how environmental management should be actually performed according to the standards and also EMAS regulation. EMAS is, let's say, a European regulation. So as it is directly applicable in all of the member states. It builds on ISO 40001. In fact, EMAS regulation has adopted all of the requirements of ISO 40001, build on those requirements, adding additional, I would say, aspect that range, for example, from environmental declarations of performances of the company to the involvement of employees, which is very, very important, the stress with EMAS regulation. Also with reference to legal compliance. In fact, an EMAS registered company, so is expected to be also an ISO 40001 certified company, shall conform to all the environmental regulation. So when a company has this kind of label, let's say, or this kind of certification, you know that that company is working to continuously improve its environmental performances and to respect environmental legislation. I thought it was interesting to let you know that there are databases where you can actually identify those and verify also if those companies actually have an ISO certified ISO 40001 system and EMAS registered system. In the case of ISO, each country has its own. Here, for example, you see this is Accredia, which is a national accreditation body, where looking at data banks, you can find all of the different companies certified according to ISO 40001. So in case you are a public body, or also you are a company interested in understanding who is already certified according to this scheme, you can take a look at this website. Different website, but same approach is referred to the EMAS registration. Well, the name itself tells you that a company can be registered, so insert in a register. Where is the register? Here it is. Here is the website of the European Union with reference to EMAS that gives you all the information with reference to the EMAS registration and gives you also those companies that are registered to EMAS. Also, in this case, a company, public body that wish to know if it's actually acquiring a service that comes from an EMAS registered company can take a look here. So a company can take a look of who has already implemented such a scheme in order to give evidence of their environmental commitments. So managing processes, ISO 40001, EMAS regulation, both are included and in the GPP, different environmental criteria, and recognized to guarantee the choice of public bodies. But what are the numbers of this certification? Well, actually, there are a few. Here you see a map of the world with a different number of certificates and sites of ISO 40001, with China and without China. Why? So up here with China and here without. Yeah, because we have to admit that the highest number of certification in terms of certificates and sites refer to China. Then, as you can see, the second in terms of certificates country in the world for number of certificates is Italy. And if you look at the region of Europe, you will see that we can basically identify that there is a significant number of ISO certified companies. So is the certification with reference to EMAS. Nowadays, there are around 3,800 companies that are EMAS registered. Well, we might hear something from our colleagues that will follow this presentation. We will probably see that actually, specifically, those companies that need to answer to public calls, and they are in Europe, because of the Green Public Procurement procedures, decided to adopt ISO 40001 and or EMAS registration. This is very important. This fact is fundamental because it is the evidence that the design, the idea behind the design of GPP procedures and procurements was basically this, to improve the environmental performances of companies and therefore to pursue sustainable production and consumption within Europe. But of course, it's not just a matter of processes, it's also a matter of products. I think we'll come to that in a minute. Oh, just to give you an idea of what are the main, so in terms of distribution of the different activities, what you see is that there is a lot with reference, for example, of companies working in the waste collection, treatment, and disposal activities. But there are also companies related to for example, catering services for public bodies and so on, for hospital schools. Let's say that many of the activities with reference to GPP at one point refer to the EMAS registration. I was saying it's not only a matter of processes, but it's also a matter of products. How can we support How can we guarantee, public bodies that a product conform to environmental criteria referring GPP? Well, if you look at GPP, you may find 1, 2, or 3 of this kind of label. I'll be more precise in a second. But it's interesting that also in this case, GPP refer to systems, certification systems and standards that guarantees on the environmental performances of the products they have to acquire. To explain the differences among these 3 different labels, let me go ahead. There is a slide for each of them. So first of all, we have the reference to the European Ecolabel. The European Ecolabel is, let's say, it's the reference label for those products that meet environmental minimum criteria. For which reason? Because this kind of label is structured in a way that if a product wants to have this label, to be assigned this eco-label, has to be in compliance with performance requirements. So it has to be, it has to perform very good. And it also has to performance good in environmental indicators. What does that mean? If we buy a product, there is also tourist accommodation services that is assigned the European Ecolabel. We know that we are buying a product that is over the average in the market. So it's better compared to other products in the market in both performances, so quality of the product itself, and environmental performances. These are verified by a third party. So in this way, verification by a third parties give you also the guarantee that these labels conform to environmental criteria. A second label, more than a label, is a way to declare environmental performances, is referred to the so-called self-declared claims. I'm pretty sure that all of you are familiar with this one I have here on my screen that refer to the recyclability and or recycled content of a product. Well, these self-declared claims are accepted in many of the environmental criteria, they refer to a declaration that the company itself make, but based on actual measurements or based on documents that can be verified and that support the claim the company is releasing. It's interesting, just to share with you the experience of Italy, that these self-declared claims, in the case of our country, became mandatory, became very third-party verified. Or not became, sorry. The GPP application in Italy accept the so-called self-declared claims, but this has to be verified. So in this way, it can sound contradictory, but it's a way to have an additional guarantee of the claim that the company is actually delivering, sorry. Last but not least, a very interesting way to give evidence of the conformity of a product to Green Public Procurement is the adoption of the so-called environmental declaration. Environmental declaration is not a label, but it's a way. So think about a document like this one. This is a document for construction pipes. This was a study that we have performed here in Padua University for a new PVC alloyed pipe. Well, in this case, the declaration are based on life cycle assessment studies, so life cycle thinking approaches. They are based on common rules with reference to sectorial rules. So all, for example, let's say you're making a GPP for a construction, for a building, or for public work, like the distribution of water. Well, in that case, the public body, the company, and also the designer can rely on this kind of declarations in order to give evidence that specific requirements are respected. For example, nowadays, it's really important with reference, for example, to the plastic tax that is affecting all of the countries of Europe. Well, EPD is a way to give evidence that there is a recycled content within the product, rather than the product is recyclable or not. This is third-party verified. Of course, what you've seen here is not all of the different requirements and standards that GPP actually adopts. In some cases, there can be specific standards adopted. For example, in the case of specific measure on specific metrics with reference, for example, to laboratory testing. But anyway, what you've seen, what I've shared with you, are those that are applicable in each of the different GPP criteria that were released by the European Union. So, concluding my presentation. What is the role of standards in Green Public Procurement? Well, in our opinion, standards has a central role in Green Public Procurement, as a key role in Green Public Procurement because it guarantees the system, the supply chain of Green Public Procurement. It guarantees all of the different subjects and actors that can have an active role within GPP procedures. It guarantees public body because when a public body see labels and see declarations and see certification refer to international documents, is guaranteed that there is an optimum degree of order in that sector, with reference in this case to environment. Designers are the same, because designers usually are those that rope up things together, no? Decide, for example, in the case of catering, to have different supplies rather than other supplies. Well, the use of labels, the use of standards help the designer to present a good proposal to the public body, but also help the designer to conform to the GPP procedures and procurement. Last but not least, and I will recall what Eleonora, in my opinion, correctly highlighted in the summary of what we have shared last time. We're talking about companies and we're talking about innovations. Well, a company that decides to adopt international standards and European standards, is actually adopting a new model, a new organizational model to monitor its processes, to monitor its products, to develop new products, to give evidence that they are working with the highest standards in terms of environmental performances, in terms of environmental compliance. So in this way, environmental standards are definitely, and green public procurements are tools to guide the shift towards more sustainable production and consumption patterns. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alessandro, for setting the context and for highlighting that green public procurement is a system in which different actors are crucial and in which consumers also play a fundamental role. Thanks for helping us understand better the role of standards and certification, the European Ecolabel and EMAS regulation. I think that it was also very interesting to see how many companies are EMAS registered, and that Italy, as one of the European and EUSAIR countries, represents one of the best cases. So I think that was very important also, this aspect. And now, as I have already mentioned in the beginning, the aims of this workshop is to encourage the user community to take part in the big buyers for climate and environment initiative. It is a European Commission DG GROW initiative for promoting collaboration between big public buyers in implementing strategic public procurement for sustainable solutions. Our next speaker is Mr. Simon Clement. He's a senior coordinator in circular economy, sustainable economy and procurement in the ECLAE, Local Government for Sustainability European Secretariat. He is the coordinator of the Big Buyer for Climate and Environment initiative and leads ECLAE Europe's activity in the field of circular economy, as well as several projects and initiatives in the fields of sustainable and innovation procurements and smart cities. Is going to inform us about how this initiative is designed to help drive market demand for innovative and sustainable products and services in Europe. Simon, thank you very much for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Many thanks, Eleonora, and great to be able to speak to you all today. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to present Big Buyers to everybody. I'm trying to share my screen. I hope everybody can now see that. I guess that's working.
Yes, we can see perfectly.
Very good. Okay. Just quickly before I start on Big Buyers, to introduce ECLAE for those of you, likely most of you, who were not aware of us as an organization. ECLAE Local Governments for Sustainability is actually a global association of local governments working to promote sustainability at the local level, as the name suggests. And I work at the European office of ECLAE, which is based in Freiburg. And we work on a whole variety of different topics related to local and urban sustainability. And one of the topics that we've been working on for over 25 years now is sustainable procurement, or strategic procurement, or innovation procurement, or green procurement, or whatever, any of a number of labels and names that you could give to this. But specifically today, I want to introduce an interesting initiative which is promoted by the European Commission, as mentioned, which is the Big Buyers for Climate and Environment initiative. Just quickly what we are, as Eleonora has explained already, the initiative itself is designed to create collaboration between big buyers, and by that we mean larger public purchasing organizations in Europe, in creating strategic public procurement, and through this to help drive the market for innovative and sustainable goods and services. As mentioned, it's an initiative initiated by the European Commission and specifically run by Directorate General GROW, DG GROW, Internal Market. The initiative itself is managed by ECLAE in partnership with Eurocities, and you can see already our rather simple URL at the bottom of the screen there, if you'd like to dig in more. Just to quickly give you a little bit of background to this, obviously the topic of collaborative procurement has been around for some time. There was quite a large study carried out by the European Commission, DG GROW, I think in 2017, this was, about looking specifically at joint cross-border procurement. So the idea here being to encourage collaboration between procurers working in different EU countries. As you may well know, there's already quite a bit of joined up procurement that happens at the national or the regional level, but collaboration between procuring entities in different European countries is much less common. But what this study demonstrated was that there was a substantial opportunity through such collaborative efforts. As you may well be aware, public budgets in Europe are responsible for between 15 and 20% of EU GDP, which is a huge sum of money that can be used to drive the market in a certain direction. Collectively, of course, this provides a big opportunity for having higher bargaining power on the market. So being able to make our voices and our needs listened to by the market sector actors. Of course, if we're expanding the region in which we're carrying out procurement, the central idea is also that we are increasing competition. We're bringing new market actors into the field as well to bring new ideas into the market. Beyond the direct purchasing power, the idea of collaborative initiatives such as this is also to aggregate the expertise that we have within the individual purchasing bodies. Of course, procurers working in different procurement organizations are working on very similar topics, but are developing expertise in different fields, different areas, using different techniques. This is an opportunity through collaboration to try to aggregate some of that experience. Innovative public procurement, so buying new or relatively untested or relatively new products and services, of course, involves a certain amount of risk. If we are doing this in a collaborative way, involving multiple buyers, this is potentially a way to share some of those risks amongst those buyers. And of course, what we hope to achieve through more collaboration here is some form of scaling up, a learning effect, a trickle down, if you like, to the great mass of procurers working across Europe. Of course, there are also potential barriers for collaborative efforts across borders in Europe. Particularly here, we're talking about actually procuring jointly, not necessarily just simply collaboration, but the key barrier, as always in a European collaboration, is language. What we also have, although procurement is governed by the European Public Procurement Directives as a legal structure, this of course is transcribed into national procurement laws, and these then are necessarily different in each country. So collaboration in different procurement legal environments offers certain challenges as well. Culturally, of course, collaboration across Europe is people have a different working style, a different way of approaching procurement, different traditions in the field, and this creates certain challenges for working together. Additional administrative effort, trying to procurement anyway is quite a large administrative task. If you're trying to align this with others' procurement activities, of course, potentially this can lead to certain administrative efforts. There are certain issues about carrying out electronic procurement across borders. And finally, relatively low awareness of this as a concept, the idea of collaborating with our neighboring authorities on procurement activities. This was, in any case, the basis behind the Commission establishing the Big Buyers Initiative, to see if we can try to encourage more effective collaboration between big buyers in different European countries effectively. What we've done within Big Buyers, this has now been running for 3 years, and we've established a series of working groups. And here you can see the particular sectoral focus. What we've tried to do here is focus on a specific procurement sector, so get procurers who are active in a particular area working together. One of those is on zero emission construction sites. Another is on digital solutions in the healthcare sector. The third one is on circular construction. And finally, we have a working group looking at electric heavy-duty vehicles. I'll talk a little bit more about each of those topics as I go on, but just first of all, to quickly give you an impression of what these working groups are. So effectively, these are small groups of public purchasing bodies. As mentioned, we're talking about big buyers here, and this typically tends to be city administrations, regional administrations, central purchasing bodies, etc. And in addition to those public purchasing bodies, there are also expert support organizations plus multipliers which participate in each of the working groups. The buyers themselves, the purchasing bodies themselves, we split into either buyers, which means those who are actively promoting procurement and carrying out pilot activities within the working groups, and those who are followers, who are mostly there to try and learn and then hopefully initiate pilots and procurements of their own. In each case, the group is led by a specific public buyer. So what do we do within these working groups? Well, there are a variety of different types of activities, and the activities themselves are actually established by the working group participants. So they decide, once the working group is set up, what their program of activities is going to be and what outcome they want to achieve. But all of the groups certainly include an exchange of best practice with peers from across the EU in their particular sector. What we're also doing is carrying out a series of joint market engagement activities. So we are identifying relevant market actors throughout the supply chain. So not necessarily just those who would be responding to public tenders, but also further down, just exactly as Alessandro has mentioned, those who may be producing the goods and services that are used within tenders, for example. We're doing this jointly, and we are also sharing the market intelligence we ourselves have collected through our procurement activities. What we also do is identify latest guidance documents related to procurement, latest technical developments, and of course, part of that includes the identification of relevant standards that can be used as well, and development of those standards. Ideally, what we try to do within these groups is actually develop common procurement criteria and strategies which can be used then by other organizations, by other public purchasers themselves. What we also have, at least in happier times, are the possibilities for the participants in these working groups to travel to physical meetings, but also technical visits, site visits, study visits, etc., amongst the other cities which are participating. And all of this is fully reimbursed. So what are the benefits of doing this for those who are participating in the working groups? Well, as mentioned a couple of slides ago, obviously one of the main benefits is that collectively we have higher purchasing power as a group. We did a very rough calculation of, I think, about half of the participants acting within working groups currently, came up with a figure of 14 billion euros per year in terms of the purchasing power of these organizations. So we can see that there's a significant amount of power behind our organizations. So of course, this helps us when we are going out to have market engagement, market consultations, actions. Market players want to listen to us. They want to share their information. What the participants are also benefiting from, as mentioned, is a share of information on new technologies, on products which are available potentially in different European markets, not necessarily in their own currently, and also looking at how prices are developing in different European markets. As of course, this is also a rather uneven pattern. What the participants also do is share the direct procurement approaches that they are taking, which could include the actual criteria. It also looks at different ways of evaluating tenders that are being received. It looks at different types of techniques for engaging the market, for example, and other types of procurement strategies and approaches and methodologies that are being used. This is from the participant side. But of course, what we're also trying to do here is provide benefits for the private side as well, for the companies which are applying or would like to apply for public tenders here. And we see this as a way that we can really help provide testing grounds for new innovative products and services. So effectively through these activities, through this aggregated demand, we can try to support research and development happening within the European market. What we also want to try to do with this, and our market engagement activities are very much geared towards this, is help the market to understand what public buyers want. So what their specific needs and challenges are, and how therefore they would like to see companies responding to that, but also what their specific procurement plans are, which will allow companies to respond. Now, I mean, we've been working on procurement, as mentioned, for a very long time, and this aspect of market engagement and market information, of informing market actors early enough about what your plans are and about asking the private sector what potential solutions are to the needs that you have is really very important. Without this, you're not going to get an optimal response to the tenders which you ultimately launch. Okay, I'll quickly run through the activities of the individual groups. yeah, as mentioned, we've got 4 of these working on rather different procurement sectors. We try to be as specific as possible on the focus of those sectors. The first of those is looking at something very specific and very interesting as well, very innovative, which is zero emission construction sites. And this effectively means what we're trying to do is promote non-road mobile machinery, which is driven by an electric motor. So we're electrifying the construction industry, which is quite a challenge, as you can well imagine. This work is being done by Oslo, which now has a series of pilot construction sites which are using only electric machinery. And there are a number of other city buyers within the group, including Helsinki, Copenhagen, Vantaa, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Vienna, Brussels, Eindhoven, and Stockholm. There's a very northern focus, unfortunately, to this group, and we hope very much to encourage activity happening further south in Europe as well. But those who are currently engaged in this and trying to develop pilots of their own. A quick recap of some of the added value that we're trying to bring to this sector via the work that we're doing. Primarily, we're looking to try to align demand, which will help the transition towards zero emission construction sites across the public sector, and through this to accelerate industry innovation in this topic. What we're also trying to do is demonstrate the feasibility as well as the impact that zero emission construction sites can have in cities. The level of CO2 emissions from construction machinery is fairly shocking, I would say. It was quite a surprise to see the amount of CO2 emissions that are derived from this, but of course also thinking about the noise emissions of construction work and local pollution emissions as well. Being able to document this and demonstrate the impact that we can have through zero emission construction sites is very useful. And beyond this, we're trying to increase the visibility of this as a topic beyond the work of big buyers. The second group is also looking at electrification, and this here we're focusing on heavy duty electric vehicles and specifically looking at waste trucks, street cleaning, heavy delivery vehicles, etc. The focus really here is about buying new vehicles, but also potentially about retrofitting existing vehicles with an electric drivetrain. Here, the lead buyer is the city of Rotterdam, and the other buyers in the group are Amsterdam, Oslo, Cologne, Helsinki, and Gothenburg. And as mentioned, there are a series of follower buyers who are also collaborating in this group. Here, the focus, as mentioned, is very much on accelerating the actual acquisition of electric vehicles. Many cities have specific targets on the electrification of different vehicle fleets that they have. And these activities are helped to design the cities to achieve those aims. What we also want to do is try to support the market availability of such alternatives beyond the regions where these are commonly found in any case. And also to try to support the research and development efforts from suppliers by helping to really understand what the needs of the cities are in relation to these areas. Group number 3 is looking at circular construction. This is quite broad at this stage as a group. Obviously, the construction sector is a very large one. But overall, what the group is trying to do is look at ways to reduce embodied carbon and improve the life cycle perspective, as Alessandro mentioned, and resource wisdom of public construction works. So we're looking at different ways that we can increase the circularity of construction material flows. We're looking at certain specific materials within this. Currently, we're looking at the topic of asphalt to be used in road, low carbon asphalt, recycled asphalt. We will also move on to look collectively at concrete. And again, within this field, certification and standardization is a very important topic. Within this group, we have 2 leads. The city of Haarlem in the Netherlands and Vienna are leading the group. And there are also the cities of Rotterdam, Zurich, and Brussels engaged as buyers in the group. Through the activities of this, we're hoping to profile the potential benefits of circular economy. Again, as with the other groups, to really quantify what those benefits can be, demonstrate its value. We're also trying to collectively build expertise in this. This is a relatively new area, and the cities are piloting a number of different types of activities and want to share what those are. Beyond this, we would then like to use the group to communicate these barriers, the barriers that they're identifying, as well as priorities they have to policymakers at a higher scale. And collectively, where we can, perhaps in relation to certain materials, we wish to align the demands that the cities within the group are making to the market as much as possible. And hopefully that will lead to, for example, procurement criteria being developed by the group. Final group is rather different in nature, and this focuses on digital healthcare solutions. Again, a very big group, a very big topic rather. And within this, we are currently focusing down what we really have as collective needs amongst the group. Two focal areas we have. First of those is remote patient monitoring. And the second is tools for better data management and analysis. These two topics were identified through a needs assessment of buyers who were interested in collaborating here. Here we have a large group of buyers who are engaged with us. And here I'm pleased to say we have a lot more buyers from the south of Europe. We have the National Centralized Health Procurement Authority from Greece, for example. We have a French healthcare sector purchaser, Reza. There are a number of European projects that are looking at collective procurement in the area of healthcare, such as the PIPI project, for example. We also have two agencies from Catalonia, as well as the Basque Foundation. We have Innova Puglia, who is participating as well. And as mentioned, several other European projects in this area. Here again, what we're focusing really is on the accelerating the acquisition of innovative healthcare solutions, and we are establishing a number of market engagement sectors with key SMEs and other suppliers in the healthcare sector. First of all, speaking to our buyers about what their specific needs are, and then asking the market actors to identify and pitch certain solutions to them. And through this, of course, we're also hoping to expand the market availability of these options outside of the EU regions that we're working with. And again, we're trying to help the market to respond to the specific needs that we have as procurers by really engaging with the market in these areas. There are a few publications that you can find already. These relate to the first stage of the Big Buyers Initiative, which finished last year. So there are several publications on 3 of the working groups, for example. These will be updated towards the end of the current iteration of the Big Buyers Group. So towards the end of next year, there will be further materials and publications. There's also a video which gives you a short introduction to the initiative and what we're trying to do. But there's no need to wait until we publish before you can find out more about what we're doing. The working groups themselves are closed, so there is no possibility to join those working groups as direct participants. But what we do have as an initiative as a whole is an observer group. And here we have approximately, I think 170 to 200 bodies who are participating as observers in this activity. The observer group will receive regular updates on those working group activities by email. There's also dedicated online webinars where the observers can participate and speak directly to those within the working group to find out more. And observer group participants themselves are able to share the lessons that they have and will receive information about any opportunities there are for collaboration within this. And so if anyone is interested within the webinar today, then please have a look online or write to me directly. And hopefully we can sign you up to the observer group and you can follow the activities of these working groups. I should mention also that the likelihood is, it's not yet confirmed, but next year, in the second half of next year, it's likely that there will be a substantial expansion of the Big Buyers Initiative and several more working groups being set up, at which stage we will do another needs assessment to see what are the needs and interests from public buyers. So again, hopefully this is a further opportunity to get involved. Now I've presented today the Big Buyers Initiative, but of course there are many other actions and activities taking place in the field of strategic procurement or sustainable procurement. I wasn't at your last webinar, so maybe these have already been mentioned, but just quickly to point you towards a very useful resource from the European Commission, which is their Green Public Procurement homepage. That contains criteria which can be used directly in tenders for a whole range of products and services, focusing on the most important environmental criteria and impacts that they can have. There's also a very large number of case studies of specific public purchases which have gone through a sustainable procurement action and have documented that, as well as plenty of other resources as well. So I would encourage you to have a look at that. Then there are also two websites which are actually run by ICLAI. The first of these is the Sustainable Procurement Platform, which is meant to be a one-stop shop with all forms of resources related to sustainable procurement. And the second is the Innovation Procurement Platform, which is the same thing for innovation procurement. There's a lot of overlap between the two, but I think people's interests are piqued by different words. So we have effectively two entry points for that. Okay, and that is all for me.
Thank you very much, Simon, for your very, very important contribution. It was really interesting to know about the work carried out by the working groups of the initiative, and also the possibility for public buyers to be involved in the activities, events, and much more as observers. So also to understand their needs. And I also think it is very important, the connection with the private companies. Actually, I was surprised to see that there are not many Southern Europe countries. What I can say is that we will do our best to promote the Big Buyers for Climate and Environment initiative throughout the Adriatic and Ionian region, through the project EUSAIR Bringing the Green Deal to the region, and in other forum initiatives. So we will be in contact very soon.
Great to hear.
Thank you. I remind all participants to use the chat box to write questions, ask for more information, or even just curiosities. At the end of the presentation, the speakers will answer you. So don't be shy, write everything that you have in mind. And now let's take a closer look at the case study of Veneto region. We see that Italy is one of the leading countries in the application of the GPP procedures. So our next speaker is Mrs. Giulia Tambato, Director of Purchasing Department of Veneto region. Among other important responsibilities, she is in charge of the management of the Regional Action Plan for GPP. Mrs. Tambato will share with us the strategy of Veneto region in the GPP promotion and dissemination. Giulia, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. I sharing my screen now.
Yes.
Okay. Veneto region is the first most populous region in Italy, with a population of around 4.8 million, living in 563 municipalities. The region's policy work on GPP is rooted in the National Action Plan for Green Public Procurement, which serves to invite all Italian public authorities to implement certain action and comply with its targets and approach to monitoring. Veneto has been supporting GPP action since 2015, when it approved its first GPP action plan, which was active from 2016 to 2018. This plan promoted the inclusion of environmental and social criteria in public purchases, and it also included a strong focus on the wider dissemination of GPP policy and action in the region. By developing a stronger common focus on sustainability in the region, Veneto aims to trigger the green transition, which is necessary to face the current and future environmental challenges. In 2019, the regional government renewed and updated GPP action plan, which will last until 2023, thereby strengthening the regional's GPP policy. This current action plan also includes specific action to promote the use of renewable energy sources and reduce natural resource extraction, waste production, pollution, and emission. Its three main goals are: first, efficiency in saving the use of resources, particularly energy, and consequent reduction of CO2 emissions through the spread of action of culture of green purchases. Second, a control system based on certification aiming to reduce the use of dangerous substances. Third, quantitative reduction of waste produced through action based on the targets of the 2030 agenda. During this 6 years, the GPP action plan has explained us that there are a lot of difficulties, but there are even some action that can be very efficient and effective for the public authorities. It is crucial that such policy approach think about the economy, environmental, and society as a whole in order to overcome barriers and define new goals that continuously meet needs while ensuring responsible consumption behavior. This requires a collaborative approach which brings many stakeholders on board and provide them with information, training, and technical support they might need. Therefore, for the widespread implementation of GPP, it is necessary to establish a dialogue with the decision makers and to invest in training, especially to avoid greenwashing, and improving capability are necessary to increase awareness and continuous exchange of good practice. These needs have to be done at local, regional, and international levels, showcasing the result achieved in this area by public authorities. The direct involvement of all those responsible for the purchasing process is also crucial for the effective implementation of GPP measures. Subsequently, it is essential to set up working groups involving those who deal with the commercial and technical aspects of environmental contracts and external experts for in-depth knowledge of technical specific topics. At the same time, in order to achieve successful results, it is essential to guarantee a constant flow of information about the current uses of GPP among all those involved. Experience shows that it is often difficult to implement an effective approach to monitor across all administrative departments. This is due to a lack of technical knowledge. To bridge this gap, it is essential to offer training opportunities to build the capacity in public procurers. Although there is still a long way to go, consider GPP as a structural approach. The regional government continues to support this strategy, particularly by spreading the principle of GPP through its communication tools and channels. So we have introduced a lot of instruments: website, newsletter service, online courses, publishing annually 2 guidance documents on topic of interest for GPP, supporting local contracting authorities in drafting their green calls for tenders, and provision customized training courses. I try to explain this instrument. As a first step to promote GPP in Veneto, we have created a dedicated website, summer learning courses, an help desk service, and monthly newsletter service. The website in particular offers information about GPP possibilities for personalized training, collection information, relevant events and conferences, and includes a page dedicated to advertising commercial opportunities on GPP. Then we have 2 big events. One is a regional annual event on GPP, Forum Compraverde by Green Veneto. It was also started in 2017, providing an important space for procurement practitioners and other relevant stakeholders to update their skill, collaborate, and exchange with other professionals in the field. The 5th edition of the event took place in 2021. Another important event is awards for public stations and factories, to test innovative projects and assess the best initiative for a sustainable and circular economy. Veneto region has strengthened its territorial trade association, and it awards twice a year the best performing contracting authorities and companies to boost environmental and sustainable commercial activity. This is very important to collect good practices and to copy good examples. The winner will have an award certificate and they use the award logo for 2 years. But the last instrument we have is a memorandum of understanding GPP. To create a common focus on sustainability and innovation in procurement across the region, the regional government worked to secure a commitment to GPP with the other public buyers in the region. In 2019, it signed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, on GPP with the local universities, the Regional Agency of the Environmental Prevention and Protection, ARPA, and the Venetian Chamber of Commerce, Union Camere Veneto. The MOU aims to set up a common platform of action for such regional institutions where good practice can be disseminated and innovative solutions can be identified and incorporated into the purchasing guidelines of each institution. Particularly the dissemination life cycle assessment and life cycle costing approach. The goal is to encourage a collaboration between public entities to identify innovative solutions for a sustainable circular economy and promote research results in the field of GPP. The signatories of the MOU are committed to sharing guidelines, standard clauses for notice, specifications, similar acts necessary for the optimal implementation of the rule in the environmental sustainability of the public procurement, in order to provide assistance to contracting authorities, also ensuring addresses uniformly. Now I show you these guides. In 2020, we have introduced one guide for public catering services based on the corresponding minimal environmental criteria and with a pragmatic approach. It includes a method to calculate points for public notices and even contract clauses. The second guide is about sustainable management of waste. The next, in 2021, we have added one in maintenance of green areas based on the corresponding minimal environmental criteria. Even this guide includes a method to calculate points for a public notice and even contract clauses. The last one, guidance, is a publication about GPP and plastic, a guide to a responsible consumption and production. The MOU support training, awareness, and information activities for the implementation of joint training initiative for public sector employers, business, students. And finally, it also works on support the Veneto region, the definition and revision of the national minimum environmental criteria provided by the Ministry of the Environment. The guidelines are the most important activity we have with the MOU because in this document, the public authorities can define the several specific objectives and action have been outlined in the current plan. Training on GPP for public officers, building knowledge and certification system, Ecolabelling, sharing knowledge of implemented good practice, creating a database of good GPP practice implemented by the region, reduce waste to increase waste sorting to cut down dangerous waste. Identify trend of organization that are EMAS certified. Identify trend of public institutions that implement environmental and or social audits. Identify how many public administration implement the minimal environmental criteria and their commercial activities, which are policy tools introduced since 2012. Through ministerial decrees and provide a yardstick to achieve the objectives set out in the Italy National Action Plan for GPP and to promote sustainable production and consumption and circular economy models. This point forces firms to rethink and restructure their values creation process. Then, Veneto approach ensures that the region is doing its part to fulfill the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDGs 12, ensure sustainable patterns of production consumption. It also reaches other policy goals, including reduction of the environmental impacts of climate change by promoting the use of renewable energy sources, ensuring the proper management of waste produced via work, services, and goods through the use of contract clauses, and increasing the use of recycled materials over old ones through procurement criteria. The action of Veneto's GPP action plan were included among the action in Veneto's Sustainable Regional Strategy in the United Nations 2030 Agenda. Veneto was awarded for the Sustainable and Resilient Public Administration Award in 2021 in the context of the Forum PA, a national event of the modernization of the public administration in Italy, and it was also awarded for its GPP policy by the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, ASBIS. Veneto has also been recognized twice by the Forum Compraverde by Green, which takes place annually in Rome, winning the Best Green Notice Award in 2015 for research conducted on stationary products, and the Best GPP Policy Award in 2017 for the region's work to promote a culture of green purchasing, both within the regional authority and the wider territory. In terms of monitoring action, a GPP action plan requires that monitoring be done to assess the progress in implemented targets through the development of tools and indicators for the following. Measurement of the quantity levels of GPP, number and value of green public contracts compared to the number and total value of public contracts. Then we measure even number and type of green practices implemented by the Veneto region and possibly by other public bodies in the area. Then we amount the cost on goods and services with low environmental impact based on product category in order to monitor the rate of green purchases out of total. Then engagement of the various stakeholders in GPP training to also help identify new training needs. Participation of various local public bodies in GPP initiative in order to monitor the development of an interregional network on GPP. In practice, monitoring is not always carried out in the same way in all administrative departments. The purchasing regional department is able to annually monitor its green purchases in terms of number of green tenders and value of each contract. The monitoring is carried out by the Ministry of Ecological Transition Project Creiamo PA. In other departments, a lack of capacity and expertise in monitoring their respective purchases has sometimes emerged. The most relevant targets already implemented by the Purchasing Regional Department as a result of the current Regional Action Plan include contracts of design service and work for the new construction, renovation and maintenance of public buildings, procurement of energy services for building, energy power supply, heating and cooling services, and then acquisition of road transport vehicles, passenger cars, and light commercial vehicles. At the end, we try to introduce in every contract the national minimum environmental criterion in terms of technical specification and contract management clauses. Nevertheless, the effort to introduce something out of the box are more important because often our ideas can be more innovative than any minimum environmental criteria. Thank you for listening. I have finished.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tambado, for your speech, which help us understand how a public institution is approaching the application of green public procurement, and to present the experience of Veneto region that is one of the best practices in Italy. So thank you very much. So now we have some questions, both in chat in the question box. So let's see. The first one, I have already seen that Simon Clement reply already in the chat. So yeah, let's start with the chat and the ones that you have already replied in order to say something more if you think it is necessary. So the question was, you have cited areas like digital solution for healthcare and construction site. There is a European analog initiative for GPP about the agriculture, agri-food sector. So Simon, if you want to reply online.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I mean, there are many sectors, of course, where we could, I think, see interesting collaboration here, and food and catering is always something of interest to local governments. I put in the chat a link to a project. It's not one I'm working on directly, but colleagues of mine in ICLEI's Sustainable Economy and Procurement team are, which is COACH. And that's specifically looking at collaborative agri-food chains to try to introduce this more territorial aspect to food systems, for example. And I believe that there is a working group established or is being established on school food catering that may well be open for interest. So I'm happy to share more information about that if someone was interested in potential collaboration there. I also put a link to some of the procurement criteria which the Commission themselves have produced. I think there are also criteria in Italy as well for catering services, I believe. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of work happening in this. I could add to that, one of the links which I put for the Sustainable Procurement Platform has a database of resources which you can search by topic. One of those topics, of course, is food and catering. So if you're interested in finding projects or guidance or case studies relating to that topic, you can have a look there and find out more. You're muted, Eleanor. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much for sharing with us the information and all the links in the chat. We will provide to all the participants the links and all the materials in the next few days. Everything will be published online on our website. So let's move to the next question that I think it is especially for Alessandro. So how it is possible to make consumers buy more products that have an eco label, and also how it may be possible to support them in understanding which are the trustworthy labels?
Well, there's a lot ahead. There's a lot of things to do. Many things. You can start from primary schools, teaching young students on what to prefer in terms of environmental performances. You should work also on the retailer side. Retailers, of course, make products available in the market, displays products. So probably there should be an integrated actions towards all the different actors: producers, public bodies, legislator, designers, consumers. But probably we should start from teaching at schools. I remember when I was a young kid, I was taught about recycling. That is something that is with me since then. So I think nowadays maybe it's time to talk about sustainability, to talk about decarbonization. So maybe complex concept, but I know that young kids can understand much more than we can expect, and that's probably where we should start from.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. And the next one, do you think there is a link between the number of certification in Europe and green public procurement?
Well, that's a good question. I think there is a link. There is no study that goes in this direction, but I definitely think that there is a link between the number of certificates and the number and green public procurement. But basically, if you're in Italy, for example, and you don't have an EMAS registration and you work for public bodies, you're not even in the market. So it turns to be something that is mandatory. You have to be in place. You have to have implemented an EMAS compliance system, to improve your performances. In this way, I think it's very, how can I say, it's a way to stimulate the shift towards sustainable production.
Yes.
Can I maybe add to that point as well?
Sure.
Because I think that this is a really good example, and actually we have one from quite some time ago. We worked with the city of Reykjavik in Iceland, and they introduced a clause into their cleaning contracts to say that they would require an EMAS certification or an environmental management system for their contracts. Within a couple of years, more or less every cleaning contractor that was working within the city was certified. Not because they only worked for the city, but of course they were one of the customers, and so it made sense for them to do that. And I think this is a really good story of the power of the public purse to make a shift in the market.
Thank you very much, Simon. And the last question that I see that you have already replied here in the question box, that I think that is for both of you. So, and it is connected with the previous one. So if accepted by GPP, different eco labels are weighted differently?
Well, maybe Simon, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I can reiterate what I put in here. There is a very good guidance, because the way that you include reference to eco labels in tender documents there is a legal regulation behind this, and it's laid out in this publication that I put a link to here, how you can use them. This is the directive themselves sets certain requirements on the nature of the eco label itself. If you wish to use it, if you wish to reference it in tender documents, it has to more or less comply with the characteristics which Alessandro was explaining before about the type 1 eco labels. So fully independent eco labels, not the self-certification systems, if you want to use them. But then how you use it, how you reference it, I wouldn't say it's actually crystal clear. I think there's a little bit of discussion about how that best goes in tender documents. But you can certainly use them as verification tools. So if you want to demand a product or a service that meets certain characteristics which underlie the eco label, then the eco label itself can be used as a verification that it meets those criteria. And I think in most would now agree that you can simply say you want a product to have a certain eco label, provided it meets these certain criteria. And that's, for procurers, a much easier way to carry out green public procurement than having to list a whole series of requirements.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. The only thing I think I could add, it refers to my presentation and the role of standards. Of course, not eco-labels are equal to each other. So that's the first consideration we have to make. Secondly, once these references are included into a GPP, GPP does not weight an eco-label better than the other. But in fact, GPP refers to standards. So all the eco-label based on the same standards and should basically be considered equal. Now, this is not always the same, but should be. Self-declared claims, as mentioned by Simon, are something different. In Italy, a solution to make it equal to type 1 label was basically to ask for a third-party verification. So to guarantee about the declaration of the company.
Thank you very much to both of you. So we have, I think, the last question here in the chat. Whether there is an EU-wide cost estimate for implementing the Green Deal per capita per year? Who will start?
Actually, I have to say the cost of implementing GPP, I have no idea. You should probably take a look at the GPP website of the European Union and start from the very first like kind of white or green book, where basically they start thinking about how this will affect the market in Europe. But if I can say something about it, this should not be the right approach to look at the cost of GPP implementation, but we should look on the other way around. What is the cost of not implementing GPP? Because the real costs that we are not aware about are related to the consequences of environmental disasters and risks that we're facing every day. And if you think about climate change, this is something I can tell you. When the European Union adopted the European climate policy, the costs of non-adopting climate policies in terms of consequences were 8 times higher than adopting the policy. So I think that the EU definitely made their own works to figure out if GPP were convenient or not. But there is the environmental cost, which are usually underestimated. And this GPP is not to underestimate environment.
Okay. Simon, would you like to add something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Alessandro has just said. In a very practical sense, of course, within procurement as well, is worth mentioning that procurers in many parts of Europe still tend to look at purchase price only when they're buying goods and services. There is an increasing shift towards the use of award criteria, which are designed effectively to indicate the value that you put on the other impacts and the other characteristics of goods and services, such as environmental performance, but also to look at life cycle costing analyses, so that we're not just looking at the purchase price of a product or a service, but we're also considering the maintenance costs, the operational costs, and also the disposal costs related to those as well. And in many cases in the environmental field particularly, you may well find that the lower overall over the life cycle of a product, the cost is actually lower. The approach that the European Commission takes with the criteria that they're establishing for GPP as well, it's a rough tool, but there are two levels of criteria. There are core criteria and there are comprehensive criteria, I believe. With the core criteria, the aim is primarily that this should have very little direct life cycle cost impact on your procurement there. The comprehensive ones are those who are maybe willing to invest slightly more to achieve different policy goals, but the core criteria themselves should be fairly harmlessly integrated into procurement activities.
Thank you very much, Simon and Alessandro. And I can see also that from the chat, the person who has asked this question agree with you. So I'm also very happy about this. Okay, so I cannot see any other questions, but anyway, if you have any other questions, curiosity, comments, do not hesitate to send us by email, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So now let's try to wrap up a little bit what was the meeting of today. So Alessandro, I'll give you once again the floor to help me to wrap up and give to the audience the main key points of today's meeting.
Well, thank you very much, Leonora. My wrapping up today has to start with thanking Julia and Simon, because the real true message of today is that GPP is not just theory, it's practice. We had the opportunity last time to discuss about environmental issues and what are EU policies related to GPP. Today, we can see that GPP is something that is actually in practice, as in place. A second message, I think it's really relevant to see that the two initiatives, one guided by Veneto region and ICLEI and Big Buyers initiatives, are at the forefront of this shift towards sustainable production and consumption. I think that we have the evidence that involving different parties, it's the right way to give a kickoff to this, I would say, initiative that even if it's not mandatory, is something that we have to go to. There's no other way around. What we have in front of us in terms of challenges ask us to adopt GPP. European Union should do that, shouldn't do that, don't have to do that, because it's something that we have to do. That's it. So thank you once again, Julia. Thank you very much, Simon, for letting us know that GPP is in place and is something practical. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro, and I join you in thanking all the other speakers, Giulia Tambato and Simon Clement. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of you participating in this event and staying with us until the end. I remind you that the third and last workshop will be held in February and will be an opportunity to present the results of the EUSAIR Bringing the Green Deal to the Region project. In the next event, we will present the guidelines together with the DG Regio, of course, with the University of Padua, so Alessandro Manzardo, and our partner T33. And the guidelines will include the solutions and give practical hints on how to transition to more sustainable practices, giving insights on GPP criteria and requirements, as well as proposing tools on how to organize more sustainable meetings, face-to-face, online, or hybrid in the EUSAIR region. Along with the guidelines, a monitoring tool will be also presented to measure improvements in the organization of the future initiatives. So in a few days, as I mentioned many times, you will find information of this workshop and also the previous one on our website. I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter and to stay updated on upcoming forum initiatives. So thank you very much once again, and have a nice start of the week and happy holidays to everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Che dici, bene, no?